Albert Wong, thank you for coming. I am one of the pinball repair techs here at the Museum of Pinball. There's about 140 of us that manages the 575 pins that we have out on the floor. We have another 200 apparently in storage. Sometimes we use it for parts, sometimes we go rehabilitate those pinball machines. And so I was talking to some of the other individuals here. Every month we have a pinball tech repair event. We do it usually all day. We start at 8, we maybe end at 4. We have like pizza together and whatnot. And this is where the techs kind of go around and we find issues with the pinball machines and we fix them. So most likely after this event, of the 500 or 600 some pinball machines, probably 100 of them will have different issues. Right, and some of them would be easy to fix, and some of them are more difficult to fix, right? But we need help with all of them, right? And it depends on what you guys want to learn. So here's my name, my email address, and that's a picture of me with my first pinball machine, which is a Simpsons Pinball Party. It's by Stern, 2003. And feel free to make this interactive, right? This is there for you guys to learn. So we're going to start from the very beginning, as if you knew nothing about pinball machines. So you could theoretically own your own pinball machine, or you're looking to go buy your own first pinball machine. So if you did own your own pinball machine, welcome to the family. It's not an addiction, it's a lifestyle. A lot of us start with one pinball machine and we got kind of ease on in, right? Maybe with a $200 or $300 or $400 pinball machine, maybe a $1,000 machine, and then you have one and they're like rabbits. Then you want the second one, and a third one, fourth one, and then I just talked to another gentleman out on the floor and he has 34. I'm like going, where do you store 34 machines? So great for him. He was actually from Arizona, but that kind of happens with many of us. But once you start getting a bunch of pinball machines, right, you'll start saying like, maybe instead of me hiring someone to go and repair and upkeep my pinball machines, maybe I can do some basic maintenance at home in order to reduce the costs, right? So in this session, we're going to talk about your most common things that you see. This is like stuff, 80-90% of all the issues that you'll face. We're going to talk about that in this class. So first to start, let's talk about is the parts of the pinball machine, right? So you've got the back glass, and that is really where all the quote-unquote computer hardware is stored, right? Then we've got the cabinet, right, with your play field in there, and that's where you have all the balls moving around, and you've got flip buttons and whatnot, right? So I think you guys probably know a lot of this stuff. I just wanted to make sure that we talk about is that most of your repairs for electronic with the boards themselves is in the back glass, and most of your other repairs that you'll typically see is on the play field. Right? If you even break down the play field itself, you have targets, and these are things that where the pinball itself hits to make certain type of scores. We also have switches. So think about this as where the ball drains along the outer lanes, right? You'll see this thing that looks like a paper clip, right? And so when the ball rolls over the paper clip, it actually scores. You'll also find a lot of commonality. There's only a few parts inside of the pinball machine itself. You'll hear about terms that I'll use like coils, switches, maybe even another word for a coil is a solenoid. I'll show you pictures of these, so we'll have that base level understanding. If you've never opened up a pinball machine, this is how it looks, right? So what we do is we take off the top, the playfield glass, and we take out the bar, and we slide the glass on off, and then we can lift the playfield on up. And typically there's a rod or a piece of metal that keeps the playfield on up for us to kind of work on the pinball machine itself. Any questions itself about some of the terms, some of the parts of the pinball machine? No? All right. So pinball machine, you're going to have wear and tear, right? Wear and tear is really hard for us to go and say how often certain things will happen, but if you buy is an older machine, especially some of the ones from the Williams and Bally's years, you're talking about machines that are from the 80s and 90s, right? So you're talking about maybe 20, 30 years old. Some of the parts may have been replaced over time. If you talk about the newer pinball machines like Stearns, Jersey Jacks, these pins are still relatively new, and so you might not see these problems as often, right? It's just like anything, as if you bought a used car or a new car. Think of it in those type of terms. So when you do have wear and tear, these are some of the common problems that you'll run into, right? And we'll go through this in detail, right? So a common problem that you typically see is sticky or wing flippers. You guys have seen this before, right? When you kind of push the flippers and whatnot, right? And it doesn't seem to be able to get to the top of the play field, right? Or it's like you push it and it kind of gets stuck at kind of like stuck at the top, and the flipper doesn't fall back down, right? So let's talk about what is a flipper, right? So this is a picture of a flipper itself. So what you have here is you've got several pieces. I like to just summarize this into 3 core pieces of a flipper. So you've got the coil or the solenoid. So this is what kind of is the thing that kind of get electrified. And then you've got the rod, right? And the rod is connected to the flipper itself. And then between the rod, this metal rod, and the coil is a little piece of round plastic, right? And this round plastic, here's another way of showing it, right, is what makes it that you don't have friction between the rod and the coil itself, right? So here's the rod, right? So the sleeve that you fit on in, right? And then you've also got the coil. And so what happens is that originally is that you've got the coil here, and you've got the rod, and without power, these two pieces are apart. And when you put power, right, the metal will get drawn into the coil itself. And when the rod gets into the coil, that's how it moves the components to make the flipper actually actuate, to make it move, right? Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that when you have a play field, when you play, there's oil, there's grime, there's actually even carbon that forms because of the electricity running through all the switches and whatnot from that standpoint. So what you'll see is that you'll see this gunk kind of show on up, and when the gunk shows up originally first, it'll gather on up maybe on the rod itself, and over time this gunk will be pushed in to the sleeve and into the coil, right? And what happens is that gunk is the reason why you have this sticky wig flipper, right? So what we go do is we buy either kits like this. You can either buy just the sleeve, the coil sleeve itself, or you can buy a full rebuild kit, but generally speaking, we just buy this. This is ranges from 50 cents to about 75 cents, and we replace them, right? So these are places where we've got maybe the shooter rod, we've got figures that move. You're also talking about things like slingshots. You're talking about things where it's bumpers, right? They all use all these same parts, right? You'll see a lot of us replace them maybe every single year, depending on usage of the pinball machine itself. And there's about maybe 20 to 30 of them that you'll replace.
How much do those parts cost?
50 cents to $1, right? So it's one of those 5-minute, 10-minute things where you've got to take out all the screws. and then you remove the rod out of the coil itself, and you throw away the sleeve. You just put a brand new sleeve on it, and then you use some type of cleaner. We usually use something non-abrasive like rubbing alcohol, and we use Q-tips and basically clean the rod and clean the hole inside of the coil itself.
What holds the sleeve in?
What holds the sleeve in? Actually, on one side you'll see it's flared,
Uh-huh.
and the other side is not flared. So what happens is the rod only goes in one way. Right? And the way it's designed is that it's actually pretty snug, right? So it'll fit on in. If you'll find that the sleeve is too snug, typically that means is that the coil itself has been warped, right? And so it's a bad coil, right? You don't want to have you want it that it's nearly very smooth for you to put in the sleeve, and you want to make sure the rod which goes in the sleeve is also very smooth. The more smooth it is, when you push the button on the flipper, pow, 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 right? There's no friction, there's no gunk that is stopping it from moving freely between the coil and the flipper itself. Right?
You say you switch those out yearly for high-use machines?
Yeah, or whenever you feel like it's weak, or when you think it's sticky, right? It's really a matter of how much play that you have, right? And I'll have a chart later on in the slides that says here are the things that we typically do, monthly, semi-annually, and annually if we have like kind of like a equivalent to a car maintenance cycle. The next item here is around pinballs that don't seem to be moving fast or moving quite audibly, right? Most of the time, the reason why is that, let's talk a little bit about the play field, right? The play field itself, right? It's actually a piece of wood with paint on top of it, and there's either mylar, which is, think of it as like a plastic kind of sheet, or there's clear coat, automotive clear coat on top of it, right? And when you play with the pinball machine, you can imagine the pinballs are just bouncing up all the time, so sometimes it dents the clear coat, sometimes it goes and rubs away even the clear coat, and you get down to the paint, right? So unfortunately, there's no easy way for us to solve it, right? This is like kind of like getting a key scratch on the on your car, right? So what we try to do as much as possible in order to fix situations like that, or where the ball heavily travels or whatnot, we either wax it, and we use carbonara wax that you can just buy over at any automotive shop, Walmart, Target, whatnot, right? And we basically, clean the surface with either something like simple green. You can also not use that. You can use your choice from that standpoint of a cleaner. And then we wax it and then let it dry and then buff it on out, right? And you'll be amazed. If you want a new kind of feeling of your play field and make it really slick and fast, easiest way is to wax the play field, right? Where there's areas that may be a little bit more worn out, you'll see us that we may put mylar to protect those type of areas and try to put a coat on it, and we might actually even try to not sand it down, but try to get it as close as we can to get back to level, right? So just watch out when you have this play field. That's one of those things where it's not easy to reverse. Targets and switches not registering, right? So a target and switch, what is a target and switch, right? So a target and switch is this is a target, right? So these are where the pinball kind of hits either a square or a circle, and then it registers a few points from that standpoint, right? Anything up on the play field that kind of registers where a pinball hits it, we really call that a target, right? And here's also a picture of it sideways, right? As you can imagine, when you bang on these targets over and over, what happens is that you see how there's two pieces of metal here, right? over time, these two touch, because the pinball basically bends those two pieces of metal together, right? So the easiest way for us to go fix this is that we use a tool. It's called a leaf adjuster, because these are called leaves. And we put the leaf adjuster, and it basically bends the piece of metal at the base. So it separates the two pieces of metal, right? So that way, when the pinball hits it again, right? When the two contacts, two leaves touch each other, that's where the points actually happen, right? Really simple. Marco's Specialties out in the game room is selling those leaf adjusters. I think so, either $2 or $6 from that standpoint. All of us who are techs, we keep one with us at all times. That's probably the easiest, fastest way, right? If you see that the two pieces of metal is not touching, right, the next easiest thing for you to go do is honestly to replace the target itself. On average, they're about $8. So it's a little bit of light soldering for you to go and just buy the part and then switch it on out. If you're not familiar with soldering, there are kits off of Amazon.com, I think for $15 or $20, and it's a practice board, right? So they'll have like maybe a YouTube video that helps you, says this is how you go and solder, this is how you use a soldering iron, and you can practice on a board that kind of, I think it's a build your own kind of radio type of thing, right? And so you can practice soldering and desoldering instead of doing it on your pinball machine. The nice thing also about a pinball machine, if you do soldering, right, you don't have to make it perfect, right? You just have to make sure that the connection actually works, right? So you'll see over time, maybe if you come as a tech here at Museum of Pinball, you'll see like there's some soldering jobs that are like so-so, and there's some ones that are great, and hey, the pinball machine works, right? I mean, current goes through the wire, points slide on up, it's good enough to go, right? Any questions about switches and targets? Right? Oh, this is a switch. I forgot to mention it. So this is a switch. It works kind of the same type of idea, right? So this situation is usually a ball rolls over the top, and this pushes this. It's about the width of a paper clip down on a little button, which we call as like a cherry switch, right? So what happens is that the ball rolls over, and then it kind of pushes the button down, and that's where we get points from that standpoint, right? Easiest way also to fix from that standpoint is you bend it a little bit, see if you bend it away from the switch, if it'll work, right? Worst case worst, you also just change is the cherry switch itself, right?
Do the cherry switches like these, that actuator arm, the paperclip thing, that are those like attached to the ones that you buy specifically, or?
Yeah, so the question is that, are these pre-attached to the switches themselves, right? So yes, they are. When you buy them from the catalog,
Yeah.
so when you own your own pinball machine, one of the first things that maybe you should go and look on up is either buy is a manual, or there's PDFs of the pinball manuals online, and they will tell you is the model number of that switch at that position. So what you want to go do is buy the exact same version. Right? So there are switches that are bent in different shapes, right? And it's really tough for you to bend it to whatever it is. There's not like one generic one, so it's faster for you to just buy the model that is for your pinball machine for that specific spot.
Because at the video games, you use the same kind of cherry switches like that, but for the buttons and stuff.
Okay.
But I was wondering about the actuator, so they're all one part. Okay.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of people who, like I mentioned, is that once you get the model number, you can look it up online, and they'll send you exactly what it is.
You use that same tool for both the switches and the targets?
So the question is that if you use the same tools for both the targets and switches, and it really just depends, right? Depends on the switch. I mean, your goal is the same, right? The goal is that most of the time, after usage, either the cherry switch isn't totally, has the button is not pushed down, right? You want to make sure that it's not totally pushed down from that standpoint, or the pieces of metal are touching. All right. Next item. Kickers take some time to kick, right? So a kicker here is things like maybe the shooting rod, right? You can also think of it as a slingshot. You can think about it. It's kind of a different variant of flippers, right? Because it uses the same coils, it uses the same rod and whatnot. It's just at a different place, right? It may be just straight through from that standpoint. So you're going to have the same type of problems, right? You're going to have is grime inside of the coil itself, grime on the rod, right? So you replace the coil sleeve. That's the easiest way for you to go and do that, right? Second thing is to check if the coil is damaged, right? So we want to make sure that the sleeve fits really nice into it and the rod can move inside of out, right? So you got to diagnose what it is. Some other times, so if it's, the sleeve you replace, the coil looks fine. The other type of thing that happens is perhaps even the rod is damaged, right? Because you think about it, this thing keeps on slamming. Over time, it may have slammed in a wrong position, and then you see this dent in the rod itself, right? So you'll have that happen too. So when you take it apart and play with the kicker itself, you'll know kind of it's one of those three things. That's the problem, and then you just replace it. Makes sense, right?
Can I ask a question about
Yeah.
that one too?
Yeah.
So where that the piece, the pusher rod or the kicker rod is there's a lot of carbon buildup outside of that area.
Yes.
And even some arcing sometimes.
Yes.
Is that's normal or?
So yeah. So what happens? The question is like sometimes around this. Yeah, outside of the rod and the coil, there might be this area might look dark, or you actually see burn marks or whatnot from that standpoint, right? Is that normal, right? So the sad thing, it is normal. The carbon is actually because of sparks that are ignited, depending on what type of pinball machine that you have, right? Like the Williams and Bally's actually have full power. Straight into the flippers themselves. So you'll see that in pitting very common.
Right.
The Sterns don't have, they were designed differently, so they don't have the same type of issue, right? Generally speaking from that standpoint, you've got different opinions from the various techs of how to go and fix this, because that's just purely a cosmetic thing. Some of us, we just use is rubbing alcohol with a Q-tip, and then we'll just, get rid of the carbon from that standpoint. Personally speaking, I kind of cheat. I use electric cleaner that you can buy at Home Depot, and I just spray that thing.
Cool.
Right? I just spray it, and then you kind of see it's like, if you've ever done, it's like kind of like, it's like WD-40, right? When you spray it on a part, you just spray it and like it looks new underneath, right? That's personally my way, but that's the thing is when you're your own pinball owner, some people are really adamant against using, anything that's chemical, right? And they just want to use the minimum needed to go and clean the machine. Yes.
What kind of voltages is there at that?
Yeah, so there's ones for different voltages from that standpoint, right? So typically most parts in the newer machines are 5 and 12, right? So if you do touch, say for instance, one of these parts, you'll have a slight buzz or slight tickle, depending on how much it is. Of course, we don't advocate that, right? But when you work on your pinball machine, there are times that you need it on to do the testing, and I would say you get shocked now and then, a couple times, right?
After a while, you don't even feel it.
Yeah, after a while, your hand just kind of like cramps up, and then that's like, okay, all right, 30 seconds later, right, your hand comes back, right? All right, next item, balls grating a lot. So this happens quite often, right? So the biggest gist about why balls grain a lot is that the pinball machine is not leveled, right? So if you look at the factory, the manual actually tells you whether it's like 6% incline, 8% incline, right? You want to make sure it is to that spec, right? Some of the newer pinball machines you'll see is there's a leveler on the playfield itself that tells you what is the incline, right? And that helps you from that standpoint. A lot of us carry our own leveler, right? So the question really becomes is like, do we have that vertically correct, right? Most of the pinball machines do not have one that's right or left, right? One of the ways that we can tell if it's tilted to right or left is that there's an audit menu, a service menu inside of the pinball machine, and it tells you how many balls have drained to the right lane or the left lane, right on the sides. And that can kind of give us an idea of that it's balanced, right? So that's kind of like one of those easy fixes. Please do it with a friend, someone lifting the front, and then you kind of fixing the wheels, and then someone else lift the back, and then switch places and fix the back, right? You'll see that quite often. A lot of these, like that repair in itself is, I would recommend at least 2 people. Next item we have is a weak plunger or weak slingshot, right? So weak plunger, weak slingshot, that is also very similar to the flippers and for the kickers. It's pretty much designed the same way. So it's the same type of thing, right? Where you're going to go and replace is either the rod is actually damaged, the coil sleeve, just do it. It's only 50 cents or $1. They sell them in usually packs of 10 or 20 or 25. Just replace it all the time. And then the question that becomes is also is the coil itself, right? Make sure all of it's smooth. You'll see us when we're actually doing the repairs, we'll actually play with it to make it as smooth as possible. Because then when it's powered on up, bam, 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 you'll have that high powered as much as possible. Lights burning out, right? So we have several different lights out in the marketplace, right? So you have ones that have a little bit metal around it, different sizes. We've got ones that you just insert, right? We even got ones here that are LEDs, right? So most of the lights are actually are done serially. So think of serial as that one light bulb is connected to another light bulb, kind of like Christmas lights, right? So if you see more than one light go on out, chances are there is an issue upstream, right? If you see just one light, typically you just replace the light bulb itself, right? It's one of those things. If you want like a really, really cool tool, Klein sells a tool. There's others from that standpoint. It's basically a low voltage tester, right? So you just run this low voltage tester. It looks like a pen, like a big pen, and you just run it along the line, and it'll tell you like, oh, there's power in this line. There's no power in this line anymore, right? It kind of gives you an idea of where the problem is, right? And it just takes time for you to go do that, right? If there is a bigger problem, then you're talking about maybe a situation with the board itself, right? So that's kind of one of those things, it's like a 2-in-1 thing, right? The easier one from you is really around things like replace the bulb, maybe it's a bad solder, maybe this section of wire needs to be replaced, which also is solved by a new solder. You solder some new wires to it. All right. Any questions? You guys are easy.
Where's the best place to get new bulbs?
Best place to get new bulbs is that the bulbs are actually, I don't know if it's specifically designed for pinball, but usually we go to the pinball websites, right? So this is like Macro Specialties, Pinball Life, and then we buy the lights that we want from that standpoint. You'll also see that a lot of us like to go maybe, save a little bit on power bills that we'll buy as LED lights, right? If you do buy LED lights, you'll notice that the LEDs are like they're just either on or off, right? And so there are other aftermarket parts that you can buy for LEDs that kind of make LEDs look warm.
Like gels over it?
Yeah, you can think of it from that standpoint. There's different ways about it. There's options that you can go buy. This is like one of those customization options, right? So you'll see these on YouTube videos where it's like you take the YouTube video and the lights are so bright, right? And then you see another YouTube video of the same pinball machine, and it's like it's got this warm glow, and you can just see the play field and whatnot. It's kind of like differences like that. But you know what? It's your machine. You can do whatever you want to it, right? So if you want to change out the lights, change out the lights. If you don't want to change out the lights and use factory stuff, you can do that too, right? And nice thing is the hobby allows you to do all those levels of customizations. Okay. The bane of our existence, battery leak. Battery leak is really, really bad. If you look at some of the sterns from that standpoint, they locate the battery at the top of the backboard, right? And what happens is when it leaks, the alkaline acid drips downwards across the entire board. And once it's damaged, it's kind of damaged from that standpoint, right? So the first thing you'll see for us to do when we typically buy our own or we own our own pinball machine is that we replace this, right? And you can use things like NVRAM, which is a chip that basically holds an electric charge. We pop out a chip, we put in that one. Or we might actually change the location of where the battery's at to, say for instance, the bottom of the box instead of at the very top. So if it bleeds to nothing, right? So you'll see some light soldering that we would do if we move the board from there. Typically, also for battery, and I'll have this a maintenance list. We do it. We change it out well before the full lasting battery, so like 2 years from that standpoint, instead of waiting for 3 or 4. Other item that you'll see quite often is fuse burnout. So a fuse is this. This is one of the boards that you'll typically see in the back glass, right? And we have ones for different sizes, right? So you'll have a slow glow or fast glow, and there may be 2 amp, 3 amp, 5 amp. They come in different sizes. Make sure when you do replace as a fuse that you get exactly what the manual says. You can't mix and match, even though it might fit in there, right? And one of the things that we do, and this is one of the things that you might have in your toolkit, which I highly suggest you go buy, is a multimeter, right? Sometimes Harbor Freight has them like as low as $5, right? You can go spend hundreds on a multimeter. You don't have to get that fancy. But there's one setting on the multimeter that you want to use, which is called continuity. And continuity basically says that if I touch one end, say for instance, touch this end, and I touch that end, what happens is if I hear a beep, that means electrical current can go across, right? Beep means it's good. That means the fuse is working. If there's no beep, that means the fuse has been blown, right? And that means that you should replace it. Just curious, how many people know why we care about replacing fuses?
Save coils.
Yes, well, save any of the electronic parts, right? The idea here is that when you see a surge or anything that's happening kind of weird on the power level, right? I'm kind of simplifying it, but anything weird, instead of damaging all the electric components, the fuse get blown and the connection is severed, right? Cheapest place for you to buy fuses is by bulk through one of the pinball websites. If you're in short need immediately, they're like $2 each over at Home Depot and Lowe's in the electric section, right?
I think they have them at car shops too, like, what am I trying to think of? I've seen some of the same ones over at Pep Boys and...
Ace carries them too for relatively a better deal.
Right, right. So the comment was where you can go and buy these fuses, and there's a bunch of places that you can buy these fuses at. Especially when you have a couple machines, then you can kind of share parts, right? As long as you have the right amperage and whether it's slow or fast flow.
Question.
Yep.
Does it tag and say possibly around the, like, silk cream, what kind of fuse is in there? You gotta refer to the manual?
Yeah,
Or just refer to
so
pull out?
yeah, so typically the question is that can you just look at the fuse or is there something on the board itself that says what's the amps or what's the type of fuse there? And yes, there is usually a section that's printed in white, like it looks kind of like this, but there's like a section that you can kind of read
Okay.
about what are the fuses that are inside the machine, or there's a piece of paper that shows what the fuses are, right? Worst case, you can even pop these on out, but what you want to do is verify, right? So it's not to say that maybe, for instance, the manufacturer has changed specs, right, over time, like they call them service bulletins, and it says, hey, you should not use the one that's in the original manual, you should use this new one that we recommend. Just make sure that you check that from multiple places that it should say the same information. All right, that's all for the major things that you're going to see out in the when you have your own pinball machine or you work on a pinball machine here at the Museum of Pinball. Typically, like I mentioned again, this is 90+% of almost all the things that we see here. So of the 100 machines, probably 90 of those machines have some of these issues. The other 10 may be a little bit more difficult. Like I was just walking around the floor and I smelled something burning. Yeah, that's bad, and that's maybe more than just a few fuses to replace, right? Or even a few coils to replace, right? So sometimes we can find out what it is. Sometimes, unfortunately, we're going to have to go and replace what we were going to replace, right? All right, so what are some things when you get that new pinball feeling, right? So every year you'll see us that will buy changed rubbers, coil sleeves. I mentioned that's because of the gunk. Upgrade to the latest software, right? New pinballs, right? And I kind of mentioned why. Rubbers, it's kind of like tires, right? If you've ever had a motorcycle or a new car, you put new tires on it, it feels like a brand new car, right? Get that grip on the road, whatnot, right? So one of the other things you can go do, you can obviously buy some nice high-end rubbers. The other thing that we go do, because we have so many pinball machines here at the MOP, is like maybe we rotate the rubber by 90 degrees. Right, so just basically the ball hits a different part of the rubber band, right? And you'll actually see there's a huge different feeling. Typically, when you can't get to the top play fields, if the rod and the flipper seems to be all okay, it's because the rubber has lost its elasticity, right? So you can go and do that, and that's one of the cheap things you can go and do. They sell you a whole, I think for $15, you get like 30, 40, 50 rubbers from that staff of different sizes. You can go and easily change that on out. I talked already the coil sleeves, right, because of the gunk. Latest software, right? That's a really big thing. Like the Jersey Jack, that's Pirates of the Caribbean that's out there. It got released only this past year, right? Probably we think around, and depending on who you talk to, it's only 40% of the code has been written, right? So there's going to be a bunch of other patches that are on out there, right? So you'll see us quite often that will, for a lot of the sterns that are still being built right now, we'll come back in and we'll do as a patch for it. And the patches are kind of easy. You just download a single file, usually off of the website, you put it on a USB key, and then you put the machine in type of like a maintenance mode, and it'll load the new software from the USB key and update the machine itself, right?
Are the older machines chips, changing out wrong?
Yes, yes. So the older machines, when you're talking about older machines, this is pre-2003, 2002. From 2003 and on, this is like Stern White Stars. White Stars do have, you have to pop out a chip. So you're talking about the next generation of SAMs. That's USB key.
Okay.
Yeah, and so a lot of places, pinball sites will actually sell you it. I think sort of $10 or $15. Or if you know a guy, like, or here you donate your time at the Museum of Pinball. We do, I think, have 2 machines that we can basically burn our own ROMs, and so that we do our own upgrades here.
Okay. Cool.
All right. New pinball. I mentioned that a little bit. When the pinballs move around, the play field, you'll see that the pinball itself gets chipped over time, right? And that chipping, that the burrs that small burrs that you see on the pinball, gets transferred onto the play field, and basically you're chipping away your clear coat, right? So one of the things that we do, it's like $15, $10 for you and get a new sleeve of pinballs, right? And we just replace that as we feel like we need to.
There's no polishing type of thing.
Yeah, so you could polish. The question is, like, do you polish your pinballs themselves, right? So you could do that if you want to. It's really what you would like to go and do, right?
I just wondered if there's because I know there's tumblers and stuff, but I imagine there's got to be some kind of way to do that.
Yeah.
Just throw it in something that'll polish it for you.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, definitely. You got those options. There's also maybe a debate about roundness.
Yeah, I
Right.
can see that would be an issue.
Right, and so that's where we're like going. Maybe why not change out the pinballs themselves, right? And anyways, you need a bunch of items to get free shipping, so we just add it on into the pile to get free shipping, right?
Gotta use it, might as well.
Yeah, might as well. So as needed, change broken lights, clean and wax your play field, and I talked about this NV RAM, which is the replacement for the batteries that you have, right? Really popular for us. This is where I mentioned is the rubbers. A lot of us, when we clean the play field, we use a thing called Novus. Think of it as a reconditioner, cleaner and reconditioner for plastic and for clear coat. You can actually use Novus for like the ramps, the plastic ramps, the play field. It'll actually even take the color off the rubbers too. So if your rubbers were originally white, you'll see that when you play with the pinball over time, it becomes black, right? So it'll take that color on off. You can actually, outside of pinball, you can use it to go and get the yellow out of your car headlights.
It's made for plastics.
Yeah. I've actually used it to restore a CD.
Yeah, there you go.
We use it in the hobby industry as well.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Stuff
So-
is amazing.
Yeah, the stuff is amazing. There's 1, 2, and 3, which is difference of harshness levels, right? Typically, we try to go. So if you read the manufacturer for Stern, they recommend 2 at the middle, right? But a lot of us, we kind of use the least harsh setting, right? Because when you use it, you're actually taking a small little strip of it off, right? A top layer off, right? So we try to take it as little as possible. Here's what we're talking about, wax. This is the #1 most popular one, carbonara wax that a lot of the pinball guys use. That's what I use too. This is the NV RAM that I was talking about. So this was the replacement for the batteries. You pop out this chip, you put in this chip, and fine. And then we just use Windex for the glass.
Is the wax for the playing field or?
Yeah, the wax is for the play field.
I've never heard of waxing glass.
Oh, we don't wax the glass.
Okay,
Oh,
that's
we only use Windex on the glass.
Okay.
Alright.
So how complex is the NV RAM replacement?
Oh, the NV RAM, you'll have this notch on it, and basically you gotta carefully kind of pop out the chip, right? And then you just push this on in.
Do you remove the battery pack?
Yeah, yeah. So what you don't have to remove the battery pack. You can just take out the batteries,
Oh,
right? Yeah, if you want to, you can just cut the 2 wires. I think it's 2 wires to remove the entire battery pack, but that's really your own choice. I consider doing this is like the equivalent of maybe like Nintendo cartridge or Super Nintendo cartridge, except you kind of, maybe use like a little hex wrench to kind of wedge the L part in there, and you like kind of pop it on out.
I got a card
Right.
years ago.
So it's not that tough to do it. They're about 20 bucks, 20, 30 bucks for this enemy round. Fine.
Are there chip pullers available?
Yeah, there's chip pullers. You can go and do that. Actually, and even I have a fuse puller too to help me pull out stubborn fuses. But there's a bunch of us that no problem. There's a bunch of us also that just use hex wrenches to go and pull it on out too. Just your choice.
I usually use a flat tip.
Yeah, flat tip, right? Do what you think you should do, right?
Okay.
So this is what we call a shop job. You'll hear that when someone sells you a pinball machine that maybe is used. They'll say, "Oh, I did a shop job," right? Now the definition is a little bit different between people who own pinball machines, but typically a shop job is this, right? Vacuuming inside the cabinet, replacing damaged parts, replacement of a lot of the components that get used over time. Any questions? No?
Is that documented anywhere?
Yeah, so these slides will be up on the Museum of Pinball and on Arcade Expo, right?
Okay.
And then you'll get a copy of these slides, yeah. This is also a rehab shop job. This is actually even doing more maintenance on it. So this is, I think we covered a lot of these topics, right? Replacing bulbs, filling in heavy wear spots.
Do you use like a wood filler or something?
Yeah, so, well, for this one, typically heavy wear spots is what we're talking about is somehow to fix the clear coat damage, right?
Okay.
So either we put Mylar or whatnot in there.
All right.
There's different ways for you. It's the same thing as, think of it as an automotive clear coat. So how would I fix as a clear coat scratch from that standpoint, right? It's your choice. Oh, thank you.
So is it like a Mylar, clear Mylar right over it?
Yeah, so you'll see us, sometimes we'll cut it to size and whatnot.
Just put it right over that.
Yeah.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's really one of those debates is how much you want to keep it original, right? So, some people say that's characteristic, right? It gives a character, right? To have these little spots on it, right? And then there's other people, so it's like, I just need to go and, fill it in with wax and then, buff it on out and, just don't buff it out as much, right? And just keep on doing that. Yeah, but pretty much, I think, you can go and, spend the time doing all those things if you like. So what's in my repair bag, right? So a lot of us, we like nut drivers, long nut drivers. You'll have us have wire crimpers. You'll have us have a multimeter. You'll have leaf adjusters, whatnot, right? These are a lot of the tools that you have at home already, right? Personally speaking, there isn't a set off of Amazon that has everything pre-built on in. You'll find that some things like the leaf adjuster, you'll only see that at pinball shops or websites that they'll sell. But pretty much everything else, like for you to go in and change out a fuse puller, you can get it at Home Depot and Lowe's, right? The nut drivers, right? You can go and get that also. I love the Klein ones, the magnetized ones, right? Because when you unscrew the screw, right, it's going to come out with you. And I get one of those magnetic pans so that I can make sure that I remember what screw was taken out from one part of the pinball machine, right? You have that. I also have the telescoping rod, the one that is I dropped the screw somewhere and they're like, I can't reach it, so then I'm using the telescope rod to go and pick up the screws or other parts that I might have dropped, right? So these are all things that over time, if you want to make your life easier, you just go and find parts from it and then you build your kit over time.
I'm assuming that's the website to give you a rough idea of probably what you should get.
Yes.
The bottom there.
Yes, correct. The URLs at the bottom is just recommendations of what you should go and get. Right. And then there are more resources for you to go and lots of links for you to go and see in here, right? And that's the basic gist, right? So
Can we go back to that last
please.
slide real quick? I think we all wanted to take a picture of it.
Oh, whoops.
Why don't you go back? Go
I
inside.
have to go back into the back room. Sorry.
It's gonna be up on the website.
Okay.
While he's doing some repairs, quick change in our schedule. At 3 o'clock, we're going to have Billy
There you
Mitchell
go.
and
Walter Day.
Walter Day here, and I think they're going to be discussing about the oh god, what was the I think it was an item on one of the gamer scandals that was coming that came back a few years ago. So if you'd like to stay here, we'll make up more popcorn, and we'll be here starting up again at 3 o'clock.
Well, thanks for everybody for coming. I'll be around. Feel free to ask